He's the leading web accessibility company committed to enabling the fundamental human rights of digital inclusion. In this role, Jeremy forges relationships with digital agencies, corporations, universities, and tech platforms to help them and their customers with their digital accessibility journey and make the web more accessible. So after starting out in the nonprofit world, Jeremy's now spent the latter part of his career working at mission-driven companies in the areas of solar energy, citizen feedback, human resources, and now digital accessibility. So welcome, Jeremy. We're so happy to have you here. And when I started looking for something, we were doing things internally in our organization to try to make things more accessible for people with disabilities. But then we began looking for software because I just thought there had to be a better way to really make sure. And when I found UserWay and found you, I was just blown away by what the capabilities are and the ease of it and how easy it is to make websites accessible for people. So let's take two steps back and just talk a little bit first. Like, why is it important to make your website accessible for people with disabilities?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me. I mean, it's every single conversation that I've had with you, Katrina, and the ethical digital team. We engaged the sales and the graphic designers. And then we always come back, as I had shared earlier, to that couch of yours that sort of we've all gathered around during our conversations. And I can only imagine what your clients and what your colleagues feel in terms of what you're building. So I've been inspired, and we look for partners who are inspiring, B Corporation. So all of those different things, to have that type of experience and that type of partnership is exactly what we're looking for at UserWay for accessibility.
Nice. That's wonderful. Yeah, I love what we're doing here. So let's tell the world. Yes, yeah. So what's the first step? Why do we even need to worry about this? Why is this something that we care about?
Yeah, so I think that it's a great title for the presentation, right? And the word of easily, right? It's a question of how UserWay started. It was started by our CEO, who had another company, but it was doing freelancing, and he basically said, okay, when someone came in and asked for a website to be built for a blind community, he very quickly said, well, how do blind people navigate websites? And he started examining this, and it wasn't easy. It's very cumbersome. It costs a lot of money. And he said, we have to make this more accessible for people. How can we do this and scale it? And he started the technology, which has become our AI powered widget. And that has really fueled an entire approach that we take, where we're looking both at accessibility in an automated way, how to make websites more accessible, but also looking still using the manual techniques as well. So when you ask about what does that mean to make a website, or why is it important, there are three areas that I would look at. And maybe Vita, can we sort of start on the slides, and I'll take a step back for it as well. So first of all, I sort of want to introduce, as part of this, our Chief Accessibility Officer. His name is Raghavendra, and Raghavendra is an inspiration. We're inspired every single day by him. But when you first start at UserWay, and let's move to the next slide, and the next one after that. So Raghavendra sits with us. One thing about Raghavendra, he has built our manual audit teams. He has built our PDF remediation teams. He is an expert when it comes to accessibility and tracks the laws and the technical aspects around the world. Raghavendra also happens to be a blind individual. And it's the last thing I share whenever I kind of speak about him, because it doesn't define him, but it is something that is just one of the aspects of him, and what inspires us. And when we first arrive at UserWay, we sit down with him as part of something called an empathy lab. And he shows us what it means for a blind person to navigate a website, an accessible website and an inaccessible website. After this experience, I cannot look at a website the same way ever. Everything that we sometimes take for granted is pronounced when it comes to someone who is blind. Not only someone who's blind, someone who has ADHD or has epilepsy or dyslexia. Those are the different types of disabilities and others that we're trying to address. It's all about, let's go to the next slide. So let's look at Canada. 1 in 5 adults in Canada lives with a disability. And then what's so amazing about that is what would happen if you would come to a website and the website was not accessible, okay? How long would you stay on the website if it wasn't working? I mean, it happens to me all the time. I put it in an address and it doesn't work and I leave. I'm done. So why should someone who has a disability, either a hidden disability or a visible disability, stay on a website? And that's what we need to think about. There are 5, and let's go through these next 2 quickly. There are 5 major categories: visual and speech and hearing, motor, cognitive. Websites are built, I like to say, like the end of a Tetris game. There's sort of blocks being put in at the very end. And what has now come about over the last 10, 15 years, there's something called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So one of the areas, when you ask the question about why is accessibility important? Well, there are guidelines, there are laws, and I'll show you some of that in a second. So that's one area. And if you go to the next slide, what we'll see is that the WCAG has 4 principles of accessibility, and we'll go through this quickly. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. We can go in and have another conversation, but robust is the most interesting. Why? Because it's not only thinking about today, it's talking about technology that's going to come in the future and being prepared and making sure as technology grows, we also make sure that accessibility comes at each stage of that growth. So that means when you go to any kind of AI, or you go to Web3, or you go to blockchain, any of those things, AI, I'm sorry, not AI, VR and AR. So those are the things that need to be. Vita, if you can move to the next slide. Okay, so the 3 things that I want to talk about briefly: usability, compliance, and the bottom line. Okay, usability is what we talk about a lot of times, and I was speaking to some colleagues at the National Federation of the Blind. It's the largest group in the United States that deals with blind people, and they very much talk about not accessibility but usability. It's a beautiful word, and it's like the curb effect. When the curb cut happened, probably about 20 years ago now, it was meant for people with wheelchairs. That's what was the intention. But fast forward to today, it's used by people with children. It's used by cyclists. It's used by people with carts. It has become beneficial to everyone. So imagine we look at the web and we don't look at it from the perspective of these different elements changing just for people with disabilities. It could be for everyone, right? Larger texts, more information, screen readers when you're tired, screen readers for children. All of these things will benefit everyone. Next, you come to compliance, okay? And sorry, next slide. So you come to compliance. And just to we spoke about the WCAG, Canada, and specifically Ontario, And then Saskatchewan has just launched one. There's a British Columbia. What's interesting is that the governors of the provinces in Canada are all taking steps in order to set their own guidelines. In the United States, that's not happening yet. It's happened in Colorado. It's happened somewhat in New York, but that's it at this point. So really, Canada is way ahead of this. The Accessible Canada Act, two things to realize: that it was in 2019. It's not just for government. The accessibility plans have already started, so that companies with over 100 people by June 1st, 2023 should have already had accessibility plans in place. Companies with over 50 by 2024, and companies with 10 and above by 2025. This is moving very quickly. The reason why I highlighted AOTA for Ontario is because of this beautiful aspect of dignity, independence, integration, and equal opportunity. They're really thinking about all of those aspects, and it's written into the laws. And then already now, over 50 people in a company must have a website accessible, and the fines, it's different than the United States. The fines are excessive. Well, not excessive. I would say high. Okay. It's all a question. I'm hearing from companies that it's excessive, but it can be upwards of $250,000. The third thing goes to the bottom line, and this is a new thing that I've added into my conversations. Vita, if you can move the slide. It's the aspect of I was in London about a month and a half ago, and there's this concept called the purple pound. It has not been calculated in Canada or in the United States, but in Canada, in the UK, they determined that $17.1 billion pounds is being lost by people leaving websites. And what I did was by 14 million people who are disabled there. You convert that over to Canada, where right now it's 6.2, but that's as of 2019. So it's much higher than that at this point. But it translates into $12.6 billion Canadian dollars in terms of people who are leaving websites, and you're losing sales, you're losing potential community members and stakeholders, and it's just an important thing to kind of think about when we're talking about it. So 3 things: usability, compliance, and the bottom line. Well, we'll get to this in a second.
All right. Do you want to come back to the slides then, and we'll just do some questions here for a moment? Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So what I'm hearing you say is essentially, and of course we believe this too, but not only is it the right thing to do to make sure your website is accessible to people, but there's regulation issues. There are there's just bottom line, right? You're missing a market. So let's talk about the regulation a little bit. Basically, what do you think is going to be changing in the regulation space? Like, I know there's several things that are coming up that have been there, but what do you think the trends are going to be about the upcoming regulations in the space?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm pointing out 20% of a population. That's what it is. The regulations, I'm not the expert in terms of the legal matters. What we are seeing is a very large push in provinces in Canada. There's advocacy groups. Excuse me. I was reading that there are advocacy groups where the governor has not pushed forward, or legislation has not been pushed forward. There are advocacy groups that are pushing for it. It all depends on who's going to come into government, how that's going to change in Canada. In the United States, we're seeing that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, is taking action. California is putting through. So what's interesting, why I'm also mentioning, I'm not sure where people are from, but I'll give an example. We were approached by a company that was Montreal based, had not ever had any type of accessibility tool or policies, and they came to us because they were sued. They were sued in a Pennsylvania court, right? So that's a Montreal-based e-commerce company being sued in Pennsylvania and needing solutions for their accessibility. So again, I think that there's going to be greater regulations throughout the world. Europe is already has passed. Every country in Europe has ratified the European Accessibility Act, which goes into effect in 2025. But Germany and Italy and Greece already have, and it's also going to be anyone selling into Europe that's going to be important. So it's not just where you're based, but it's also where you're selling into, as the Montreal case was highlighting. And then I think that many of the individual states will follow suit. So Colorado already has something for government and municipalities. New York State has declared that any contractor that works with New York State must have accessible websites. And it's just going to increase because legislators want to make sure that there's something on the books and that they are part of the right side of history.
Which absolutely makes sense across the board. Like for me, I look at it like, yes, it's one more step in creating your website, but it's also, we figured out a way, you figured out a way to, and there's other options out there as well to basically make it somewhat seamless. So could we actually just take a little moment? I'd actually love, this is something I thought was just really cool. I'd love to be able to show everybody, could you just share a little bit more about UserWay itself and, how it can help? Like, what does it look like for people with disabilities? So people can actually get a visual understanding of what it is that happens when they put in some of these accessibility softwares.
Yeah. So Vita, can you go back to that slide on assistive technology? And then I want to point out another slide afterwards that relates to exactly what Katrina spoke about. So that one. So it's all about finding those solutions, right? And there are all different types of solutions. Apple's doing things, Google's doing things. We're constantly, every day, we have a Slack channel that's just on reading now and up to date. And every single day, we're inspired by new companies taking assistive technology to new heights. I did not see the Apple presentation yesterday, but I am sure that there was discussions about new accessibility. And last year, I don't know if you saw their incredible, and I'll send it to you to share their incredible ad on accessibility and the technology that's being used by people with motor issues and people with visual and all kinds of cognitive aspects as well. And then the next one, right? This is very much about this is an article written in Forbes, but I always like to share it with the ethical digital team because it's not just the law; it's ethical, and I think that's sort of the foundation of everything that ethical digital does, and it's that mission. So that's. So I'll share a little bit about UserWay. Katrina kind of shared some of the things that we're doing and global markets and recognize, but really getting down to the next slide is really about what we're trying to do. We're not just looking at automation. When Alon, our founder, started the company, it's now looking at everything from training. We're going into corporations and companies and multinationals and giving them training. So when I talked about those, the developers and how the developers are are not familiar. They don't know the lexicon. And I'm sure that you all work with developers when it comes to accessibility. Either they're on board and they're doing it, or they're like, how do we do this? And we have developed products that are about providing developers, because they are the key in this entire thing, with building code, with building accessible code from the outset. We talk about shift left. We want to start the conversation about accessibility not when someone gets a lawsuit or a fine. We want it to be at the conversation when Ethical Digital speaks to a potential client and they say, oh, have you thought about accessibility? Oh, what is that and how does that work? And to have those conversations, you're the ones that are going to be driving that, which is great. And then look, I mean, we're trusted by many brands, but we try to do this automation and manual remediation. The automation isn't there yet, so we still need the human in the loop. And when we do our manual audits, it's done with experts in accessibility. It's also done with blind individuals who navigate a website, and it's tested against the screen readers that are out there, because we want it to be seamless for blind people who are coming onto websites that have our technology.
Love it. All right. I also, just to reference your point, when we send out this webinar to everybody who registered, we'll also add that Apple video, which sounds amazing. And yeah, absolutely love that. So is there another slide to see more about the product?
Yeah, look, you know what I can actually do is to see the product. I think we could just look at your website.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Vita, sorry, you're getting put to work here. Could we also get you to pull up the ethicaldigital.ca website, and we can actually show what it looks like? So this is something that, again, when we were first starting, while Vita's pulling this up, we were trying to do a lot of the things from the design perspective, and I'll have several of those things I'll share also at the end, if you don't really want to go as far as a technology tool. But when we saw this, I was just like, this is amazing. And I come from a tech background, and I was just like, wow, this is smart tech. So I'm just excited because I just want people to also understand it doesn't have to be intrusive. It doesn't have to be, it's not it's a very actually reasonably easy thing to implement. And so I'll maybe point out, or I don't want to, do we need a drum roll here, Jeremy, where we can actually show where your accessibility icon is?
Put it up, and I'll tell you which buttons to press.
Okay. So Vita, if you can press the little human at the bottom of our icon there, the one that's steady, yeah. Right in the center, I can see your mouse moving around. The little blue one, yeah.
The other thing is I can also share screen. You want me to do it?
Yeah, that might be easiest there. Yeah. Sorry, Vita, we just set you up there. Yeah.
I see it now. Sorry, I couldn't see it when I was sharing the screen, but I see it now. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, okay. Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, access to it.
Share screen. Share it again. Go ahead, Vita, if you want to share it again, and then.
Yeah. I got it. Okay, you see it?
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't see it on my end, but you got it.
I just see this is a universal symbol that's recognized. You've put it in the smack in the center, which is great for people. I'm going to make it a little smaller so we can see some of the things. Some of the things, like a screen reader, I'll talk about that in a second. But look at color contrast. Just by having it on, it's going to change the way that people are able to view your site. Text spacing, you can see behind there, and everything's working. One thing I want to show you is a dyslexia-friendly font. We developed a font for people who have dyslexia. Some it's beneficial for, others it's somewhat beneficial, because there's such a range of within each disability. But I have to tell you a story. So 2 quick stories. I showed this at a conference now about 6 months ago, and a graphic designer who had designed their interior design rug company It was all beautiful images with text coming up, like coming up on each one of the images. And I said, oh, we have this technology. Let me show you. I'm going to put it on your site. And she's like, yeah, yeah. And then she says, there's a dyslexia friendly font. And I said, yeah, and we basically developed a font. She goes, I have dyslexia. This doesn't work. She hits it. And then all of a sudden she starts tearing up. And I'm like, what just happened? She said, I built my site. I've just never been able to actually see it. And the way that this font, I just, that's what we're trying to do. That's you talk about ethical digital, right? That's what you're trying to do every day. Change people's lives, give voice to those that are silenced. And every single day I'm inspired by the what's it called, by the work that we're doing. And just one more thing, sorry. We can do what's it called? We can do different languages, all kinds of things. But the screen reader, I started mentioning it before. This screen reader is not for blind people. This screen reader is for people who might be visually impaired. Blind people use their own assistive technology, and when our technology is loaded onto a site, when they come onto a site, when a blind person comes on with their assistive technology, like JAWS or NVDA, they will not know it's there. They will not know our technology is there. That's how our COO, who sits on the WCAG global standards, that's the seamless all access, equal access for all that is necessary. And that's what we do. And so just one last, I'm sorry, but one last story.
Keep them coming. We love this. Yeah.
I was with our COO. We went to the National Federation of the Blind, large gathering of blind people in the United States, who come together and to celebrate, to kind of learn. It's an incredible, inspiring experience. And we weren't selling anything. We were just listening. We spent the 4 days listening to blind people talk about their challenges, talk about their successes, talk about assistive technology, talk about what's happening on the internet, to gain information that we can then use in our products to change the way that we're thinking about this technology. And Lionel would ask them, oh, so what types of websites do you find accessible? And what types do you find inaccessible? And whenever they would say a website that had our AI-powered technology on it, Lionel would nod and he says, our technology is on that. And they said, no, it's not. It's an accessible website. He says, no, it's not accessible. And that's what our technology does. So it was inspiring. And they turned around and they said, thank you. And that was just that obviously makes my day, but it's why when you talk about mission-driven organizations that I want to work with, this is the one.
Oh, I love that. And we did get one question. I also encourage others to add your questions into the chat too, which basically was just asking a little bit more about the special font. And so can you talk a little bit more about that? I know you told a story about it, but who developed it? Why was it developed? That sort of thing.
There's a much better way. And much, it's incredible. It explains what we all can be doing in terms of moving the needle forward, okay, and changing the ways. And I'm just looking for something here. I wanted to just share this, right? This is on our website, okay, and it's all about how we work. It's not just about, oh, we're doing. It's the story behind it. It's why would someone who's blind someone who has this condition within dyslexia, why would they need this? What's the distinguishing a serif versus a non-serif, which we know, but that's an issue for them. So all of these different things, and we'll send along the website. It brings you into to the experience and why it happened, right? So it's not just about saying, okay, we have all kinds of fonts we have a long list of fonts that we've been using, and we were really excited, 15, 20 years ago when new fonts came about, right? And that whole where you true type but now let's make it a font for people with dyslexia, and if there are motor fonts or there are other things, to be able to provide what people actually need. And the truth is, I have to say, it's a beautiful font, not just the story behind it, but I love looking at it because it's sophisticated. And when you talk about usability, why not have fonts that we use on our websites that are accessible for all?
Yeah, absolutely. This just makes sense. And I love that you've developed it. You've taken it there. And the chat's really starting to blow up, which I love. So we have Vanessa asking, when it comes to a tool, we can pick and choose the elements. So if we're adding a tool to a language website, does it do it for other languages or just English?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now we have about 60 different languages. We're constantly, what's so interesting, because UserWay is a global company. One day we can have a call from the Gulf, another day we can have a call from Japan, another day we have clients in all of those places. But it's sort of when we speak to Australia and they need a certain for the indigenous Aborigines people there, and in Africa some of the tribes and stuff, you can't do everything, but we sort of build up. We have the ability now not just to what's included with the widget is the all the languages, but we're now doing translation for the entire site as well as an add-on, right? So we have companies that are coming with immigrant populations in certain cities, or organizations, or school districts that are saying that it can't just be English because we've just got a whole population from Ukraine or from Syria or from different places, and we have to be able to provide for them, provide for their parents. So all of a sudden, a school district puts this up on their website, and they can then utilize it not just for the widget, but for the entire website as well.
Okay. I love that. And that's so great. Yeah. Oh, Rachel's coming to work for you. Maybe for us, maybe for you. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Partners possible.
Yeah, exactly. So absolutely amazing. So again, this is something too, we wanted this for our agency to make sure we were able to be able to offer this. But so we actually went through and did a bit of an evaluation. There are other tools out there, but we really ended up finding this one to be a really great fit for us and what we wanted to do. We found the ease of it really nice too. And so there are other things that you can be doing though. So I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to go through just some design things, if people don't want to use the tech. But Jeremy's here. He's going to be here through the rest of the webinar, and we were going to have time for questions at the end too, if you want to be reaching out to him directly. So Vita, if you could put up the presentation, that would be great. Awesome. So, talking about, this is actually, I'm going to be very honest as I get into this. This is actually Kevin's part, so I'm going to try to do it justice. I'm a person who's very involved in a lot of inclusive communications, but our designer is the one who put this together. And so for designers and developers, and for those of you who are creating things yourself online, using Wix or Squarespace or things like that, this is always something to be thinking about. So basically, accessible design is the design process which, with the needs of people with disabilities, are specifically considered. And so this can be the characteristics that products, services, or facilities can be used independently with people from a variety of disabilities. So again, UserWay makes it incredibly easy. But if you're like, I want to sort of dip my toes into this area and just try a few things in my design, there are a few other things that you can be doing as well. So next slide, please. So there's 5 things that we've gone through and talked about, and so I'm going to talk about each of these things, and these are all things that you can do right now if you have access to the back end of your website, or ask your developer or designer to do. So if we want to go to the next slide, please. The accessibility audit is really awesome. And this is something we didn't even talk about with Jeremy, but this is something that you can do. And basically, it's just a tool that you run your website through, and you get a really incredible report that comes out of it, that's really helpful for your designers and developers to just talk about, like, hey, here's a problem that you have just in terms of how you've actually designed this. And actually, I'm going to toss that over to, there's a question that came in through the chat there. Does it work with Figma, Jeremy? Do we know?
It's a really good question. It doesn't work with Figma per se. Our teams are an incredible manual audit teams. We do a lot of Figma audits. It's a different process. It's a manual audits to be able to go through. With PDF, there's a whole thing with PDFs and Figma and those types of tools that are not accessible yet. But what our team does is goes into a Figma pre-development stage after the creative, and can do a whole audit of those sites to be able to instruct the developers how to build it in an accessible way.
Love that. And for those of you who may not be familiar, Figma is a software that a lot of developers and designers use to actually map out what they're going to be creating and how what they're creating is going to be designed. And so it's a really, really cool tool as well. Just to, before you actually put all the work in to create it, it kind of helps you to plan. So, okay, next slide, please. The other thing that's interesting, and this is something that you can do, again, without any additional software, but one of the things that a lot of the tools for people who have disabilities require is that you can actually navigate just using a keyboard rather than having to use a mouse or something like that. And so before you launch a website, one of just the small things that you can do is actually just test your website's functionality by tabbing through, see your links, your forms, your buttons. Can someone get through your website without a mouse, or using some of the other softwares? And so there's a technical term here for those who are developers and designers in the group, but make sure the focus indicator, the highlighter, the outline is visible and follows a logical order. And then that just makes it easier for accessibility tools to work, especially readers, things like that. But it is a really thing that you can just do before you launch a website, or if you have your existing website right now, just do a quick little test yourself and flip through and see, can I key through my website and will it work? The descriptive alt text. And this is something that even a lot of social media platforms are putting in place too. But alt text is really important because it actually describes what the image is for people. And so this is super helpful for people who rely on screen readers, or if you even have your images disabled where you don't have them distracting. So this can actually provide a lot of information for people who are using other tools. And the great thing about it too is it can actually even help your SEO. This is just an aside, but Google's reading that stuff too in your alt text. And if you're kind of putting a lot of really descriptive things there, it's actually very helpful, not only for people with disabilities, but can also increase your SEO and search engine optimization. So, all right, the next thing. So this is one that, again, is going to be for designers and developers, but using semantic HTML elements to structure your content. So basically making sure that you're using your headers and really thinking about how you're putting the hierarchy together of your development. That can really help some of these readers go through and provide something that makes sense. And so that's something also for developers that you can be doing when you're putting your plans together and really thinking about things first before you get deep into the coding. And so that's another thing. And I'm not going to pretend I can't go too deep on this part, but and then the fifth one is always, if you can, having usability testing with people with disabilities, specifically if you're trying to work with a specific group. I like doing this even outside of people with disabilities. I know this sounds funny, but I like, I think it's always important for a website to be accessible, even for people who aren't that comfortable with tech or maybe have low literacy skills. So I'll often, I'll kind of run things by, people I know. So my mom hopefully won't watch this, but she's not as comfortable online. And so oftentimes if I want to see how a website's functioning, I'll ask her to do a task and just kind of watch it shake out. And it's just can provide you a lot of valuable information. And so if you are specifically trying to work, and I know Jeremy shared a few examples of almost usability testing with certain communities and people with certain disabilities, but if you have a specific focus of people you want to work with, just actually do a little focus group, get some donuts and or go to them and find out how they're actually using it and what their feedback is. So a lot of opportunity there too to actually make some good changes. So yeah, so we are towards the end. We have about 10 minutes left here for some questions and if you have anything specifically, we have Jeremy right here. He's the expert, and basically, a few of you are very excited to potentially use this tool or understand more in this space. And so I would love it if you reached out to us at Ethical Digital, and we can actually hook you up with this tool for UserWay. And we can do it in several different ways, whether that's us, just helping and guiding your team through it, or whether we're actually doing it for you, which would be our preference. But however it works out, we really just our goal is to make the internet more inclusive. And if there's a way that we can help you do this, we would love to be working with you as well. So please reach out to me. I'll also put it in the chat box as well, at katrina@ethicaldigital.ca. And then we can have conversations and see what the best thing is for you to get this on your platform and on your website. So Rachel and I have already, we've been having some quiet conversations in the back. We're having a conversation for sure after this call and getting something set up. But if anybody else is also interested out there, please do reach out to me, and we can just have a conversation and figure out how we can best get this into the materials that you're creating as well. Our team also does inclusive social media. So we'll do a lot of alt text and that sort of thing when we're creating posting calendars for people. So that's another place, not just on your website, but your social media. You can also be influencing and connecting with a whole new market, making sure you're within regulations, and also, essentially, just doing the right thing, and, connecting with some new potential clients and just people out there. So so are there any further questions from the group? I'm just gonna. Oh, great. We got Vanessa too. Wonderful. Looking forward to that conversation, Vanessa. And I know there's a couple of participants out there that I recognize the name. I'm wondering, Rosa, I'm going to put you right on the spot. and I would love to hear your comments or your thoughts about this issue.
Yeah, could you see my hand being raised?
Oh, no, I didn't see it there, but thank you.
Weird.
Glad you're here. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, I had a question. So the website I work with is Mindfelicity, and our website is built on Shopify as the platform. And I was wondering, is UserWay offered as a Shopify plugin by any chance, or do we go about it a different way?
Yeah, we're on numerous platforms, from Shopify to WordPress. We're constantly having we have a whole list of integrations, Magento, Duda. We're doing all kinds of things, not just on public facing, but also customer facing. We work with a lot of technology companies on their platforms. That's much more interesting to me. Why? Because you're really making a difference in intranets for employees, in customer facing products on restaurant sites. All of those things that are the order forms, or all of those are much more interesting, because really going to get to the usability components of it. It's nice when it's on a site for, I don't know, a world-class soccer team, right? But it's much more important to be on their shopping site, or on their internal site, or on a college campus's a student portal, student and faculty portal. because you're really going to get people who really, really need it. So that's what I love working with and working towards. So you might not have thought that a pop-up that comes up from a right? We call it an iframe or a pop-up that comes needs to also be accessible, right? Because a person who is blind or a person who has disabilities is trying to navigate that checkout, and they're not able to because a company won't work and it hasn't been accessible. Then even more so, that's where we're trying to also reach, not just public-facing sites.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you kind of brought another concern to my mind that I just realized is that our whole thing is we offer modules for people to learn about just psychological safety in the workplace, that kind of thing. And now I'm wondering if our modules, which are on a different platform altogether, how accessible those are, because they contain a lot of interactive things and like videos. So now I'm wondering how we can go about making those more accessible. And then maybe it won't be as easy as just integrating a UserWay plugin because it's a weird platform, but it's something to think about that I'll probably talk about with my colleagues.
Yeah, I'm a couple of things. It's a very good video captioning.
Oh yeah.
Very important. Also the not just the video captioning, but modules, right? So we'll go on to modules. We had a case of a there's a in the United States, there's a government program to allow people who are blind, I think, to be able to get a discount on wireless service, right? And one of the primary intake forms was not accessible, right?
Oh.
They turned to us and they said, "Could you make it accessible?" And it was basically not just an intake form, but it was intake forms that changed. You selected one, a new form came up. You selected another part of the form came up. So we were able to provide them with the tool to make that form completely usable by people as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Rosa, happy to have a conversation too. If we can get you hooked up into this, be happy to do that or share anything with your team too. Really happy to take that forward with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have some takeaways to bring home. Yeah.
So several people have, been kind of saying, "Hey, can we get copies of this so I can share it with my team?" And and all that. So it's absolutely, we're going to send the video out to everybody. And again, our team is also happy to meet with your team at any time too, to share more information and to try to help get you hooked up into this into the software. And also, this I just one little nugget, because we're at the very end of the. Here's one that I learned when I was doing some of this accessibility work. When you put FAQ on your website, this is a bit of a risque, bold thing to say at the end of a webinar, but just say that out loud to yourself. If you were going to be a reader and have somebody reading your website to you, and basically it's a swear word. So every time you have FAQ on your website, people who are using a reader is hearing it as fuck, yes, yeah. I'll smear my way through that. But that's just something to be thinking about too, is that there might be a different way of framing or actually putting frequently asked questions, the whole word there, rather than FAQ. And so so I'll kind of step away from that one a little bit, but I do think it's it's an important kind of fun, light thing that you can be doing just to make your website a little bit more accessible. One little nugget that's easy to do when you're creating content for it. So okay, amazing. So we're at the end here. Again, I'm Katrina at Ethical Digital, and our team is here to help, so we can set up meetings in the next couple of days if you're interested in putting this together. We have Sandra, we have Vida, we have I can't really see any of the other people. I think Joanne's on here, but yeah, would love to have people reach out and see what we can do, and let's make the internet a better place. Let's change the trajectory of the internet, and we'll use Jeremy and UserWay's technology to really make a big dent in something that's important. So thank you so much. Any last words, Jeremy?
I think this is about learning. One of the best things is to kind of you'll be more sensitized to it now. But read about what's happening. Engage people who have challenges. We all have our own challenges, and I think that trying to kind of see ourselves and other people's experiences are the best way. And I'll leave you with one thing: when you go to a website next time, use the tab button to navigate the site. Don't use your mouse. Use the tab button, because what's going to happen is you're going to see a little square go onto different elements of the website. That's how a screen reader works. And when you use that tab, it's going to should go H1, H2. That's what Katrina was showing. But what often happens is it will go heading 1, heading 2, skip heading 3, go down, come back up, go down, up, come back up, like throughout the site. And you'll see that is what someone who's using a screen reader and assistive technology is experiencing. So if you don't know someone who is blind, who has their own, try that out and see how the website is accessible or not.
Love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That is really great. One last, and one last comment. I think this is actually an excellent, my past career was in adult literacy, but reading grade level is something also to be considering and thinking about people. And when it comes to accessibility, is thinking about people with literacy skills and trying to, connect with as many people as possible. So thank you, everybody. What an incredible session. I'm even taking nuggets away, even though we've been talking about this for a while. And I'm very, very excited to continue the conversation with several of you who want to continue. And we will be sending this presentation out through email. So please feel free to follow up. So thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate you being here. And look forward to sharing the good UserWay work with the world. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.